Hi, I'm Kevin Hill, and today we're going to do a fun little mountain range together, maybe even some water rushing down the middle. And of course, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for future painting videos. So let's get started. We'll start off today with a nice soft mix of blue, brown, red, and then a little bit of white on a 1-inch brush. And that just gives us a beautiful pale blue color. And we're going to put a little bit of a sky up here today. Not much, and as you can see, I did a little basic sketch of a mountain. As you know, I like to do that because what's the point of painting a sky halfway down the canvas if we know where our mountain's going to be? There's no point. You just end up covering it up with a mountain. Plus, the more layers of paint down, the worse it is. The harder it is to paint. So we're going to avoid all of that and just paint around this mountain. Obviously, you're going to hit the edge, and that's just fine. I don't want to have a hard edge there anyways. Then I can change the shape of the mountain if I choose, because I can just barely see that outline still. I don't know if you guys can or not, but I can just barely see it. There. And I'm not going to do the blue everywhere, just here and there. And before we're done with this, I'm going to wipe the whole sky down with a paper towel before we move on to the next step. There. Now that we're finished with the blue part of our sky, I set that paper towel down and pick up a filbert brush and go right through this nice soft golden color. Just a mix of yellow, touch of red and white. Work it well into the brush. And there's going to be a ton of clouds in this one today, so let's just roll them in. You could paint them in with like X's like this or whatever. It's not really overly important, but it might give you too hard of an edge, so you have to blend it out. And the more blending and the more you have to mess with these clouds, the scarier it gets, because what I'm doing here is showing you how not to get green when you put blue and yellow together. So we tinted the background with a little bit of blue, red, and white. And then I'm coming over it with a golden color, not necessarily just like a yellow and white. It has a touch of red into it. So those two things make me a little bit safer. And of course we wipe down the whole canvas so there's very little on there. It's the last thing we want is green. Touch of green is okay because actually real skies do have green in them. But not much. Very, very, very subtle, and only artists see the green in the sky anyways. There. Next, with a nice soft gray color on a filbert brush, I'm just gonna sort of begin to work on this mountain. And I'm gonna do my best to sort of follow along with the angles that I built in, obviously. Obviously, I'm gonna lose some of them, but that's okay. I'm just sort of gonna do the best I can to work with it and leave as many angles intact as possible. All right. And it's worth mentioning, don't know if I did or not yet, I don't think I did. I put a clear gel and white mix up on the sky, but everything else here is dry. Maybe a little bit of the medium sort of snuck down into the mountain when we were painting the sky, but certainly not much. So it's very important that this bottom area is dry, even the mountain. Keep it dry because it's going to be easier to paint on. But the skies, oh boy, a little bit of clear and white, and it just makes them blend, and yet they don't become too muddy. Now with a nice soft mix of blue and white on a filbert brush, let's just begin working on some snow down here. Now maybe this is sort of the little glacier area where the snow or ice, I guess it's probably ice, where it doesn't melt. There. Nice. And it doesn't take too much of this. This is kind of pale and not too bright because I want to be able to add a little bit of highlight here and there, not too much. And you'll notice that this mountain is very soft, and then it comes into a little bit sharper focus, and that's going to give you some contrast and detail in the painting, a little bit of depth. There. Also remember your warm and cool colors. There's so much to remember in mountains, aren't there? But the warm colors should be kept here at the bottom, and then cooler colors as you go up, especially in the shadow areas. There. All right, I'm just sort of imagining shaping little rocks that we haven't even done much with yet. Oh, tell you what, right back here, as I recall, that in our basic sketch, we had a little distant thing happening right back here. At least I did in my mind. There, don't know if it really came out in the sketch, but there it is. And this one, let's make this one basically totally snow-capped. Maybe it's a little further away, it's got a little more elevation, and so it's colder up there. That's why it's covered in snow. Next, I'll load a nice soft green color right on the filbert brush. And you see I've already done a bit of a sketch here, and so I'm gonna just scrub in a bit of color here to this background. And as you can see, I've done a sketch. Maybe this is a waterfall and a beautiful little stream coming forward. Pretty active stream there. It's gonna have a lot of rapids in it, so I think that'll be nice. And I'm using this color to map in some rocks and grass. Maybe this is mostly grass, but we'll bring out some rocks on the top here. There, nice pale colors in the distance, and then as you come forward, everything gets more vibrant. That's the way you create depth. It's the only way to create depth. There. Without the proper colors, it's just everything comes forward. And I don't want these distant things to be close. There, and all these lines, those are just trees. Those are just my little basic thoughts as to where I want to put things. Now with the 3/4 brush, I'm gonna carefully block in just a little bit of water down here. Maybe this is a rushing little waterfall river area. Maybe it's a river with a lot of tiny waterfalls, rapids. That would be the correct term for it, obviously. And I'm just gonna quickly, kind of carefully smudge this color in. You'll notice everything around here is pretty fuzzy. And the reason it's that way is because I used very little paint and scrubbed it hard into the canvas. As we highlight, we'll use more texture, more paint, and we'll get rid of the fuzziness. There. And don't worry about it mixing a little with the rocks. I'm actually glad that it does, because this is misty down here. We don't want the sharp edges of the rocks all over the place. We do want some, but just not all over the place. And maybe here, it's hard to tell what's happening here. Maybe it kind of comes around and there's a shallow area there, maybe, I don't know. If it doesn't look right, we can fix it later. I'm just sort of putting down some color and we'll see where we go. Now let's begin sharpening up the foreground here. So I've got the 3/4 brush going, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white, brown, and I'm gonna vary the colors as I go along. So this isn't what we're gonna use the whole time, obviously. I'm just creating a bit of light here. I'm removing some of the fuzzy edges, although a few left in are okay. I want to take out most of the fuzzy edges here, and I can very easily do this. And you can get a very, very textured effect by letting some of the canvas grain show through. There, and we can easily do that by simply having a light touch and making sure there's almost no paint in the background. It's literally just a stain. You couldn't ruin the background if you wanted to here. It is just stained right into the canvas. There. Nice. Just using the corner of the brush, very small corner, and I'm using that to shape the distant things. Because things are pretty small. In fact, we're on some sort of a cliff. Maybe this wraps around and we're standing looking down into a river, so there's nothing really right next to us except maybe some of these boulders here. So, got to keep that in mind. Nice. Just do this all over the background area. Now I'll take a paper towel and just run it right over the waterfall area, maybe a little bit here in this mist and down here just a bit. And this will help to remove some of the extra paint. Set that down and grab a 3/4 brush. And our light's coming across like this. So maybe right here. I'll just start and carefully bring it down and let off. Now, you're going to initially get all these little holes of texture where the canvas is, the canvas texture. Now, after you go over it 2 or 3 times, you'll lose those. So if you want them, leave them. But if you want to smooth them out, feel free to kind of go over it a couple times. I'm going to use both ways to create this waterfall. It really does make a nice effect if you want to sort of leave some of them, but I don't want my waterfall to look too scratchy. There. If you're not careful, all you see is just the texture of the canvas, so avoid that. All right. Now this is in shadow in here, but maybe out here somewhere it sort of starts to slip into highlight, and we can come back here with a slightly darker color that's a darker color that's lighter than what we have down to create some of the details in the shadows. There. I can actually hear my brush sticking to the canvas. That's how little paint there is. Very, very little. Sticky. There you go. That's what's going to let you do this easily. Now with our 3/4 brush, I'm just going to drop in a beautiful evergreen tree here. Now you can obviously do this with a fan or the filbert, but it's pretty tiny. And I don't want a whole lot of texture in this tree. So I'm choosing to do it with the 3/4 brush. But obviously you do it with whatever you want to. Whatever is easier for you. All right. And down in here, I think I'm going to have quite a bit that sort of sticks out over this light, because that obviously provides us some contrast. There. I'm only using a corner of the brush. I'm not using the whole thing, otherwise you're going to get a big old square. So you come back, kind of tilt that brush, and just use the corner. Now I'm not just dabbing, I'm actually moving the brush as well on the canvas so that it smooths the stroke out. Nice. Very, very light. And you may need to go over this a couple times in order to make it dark enough, depending on how much paint you have down in the background. And this one, it actually stops way down here, so let's just fill this area in. There. Now with our 3/4 brush, I'm just going to detail out a few rocks over here on the right-hand side. Don't need a whole lot of paint, just a bit. As you can see, I threw a little light color down. Now I'm throwing a mid-tone. I already had the dark in place. So we just work around with color. Always wanting 3 to 4 colors in an area to make it look close and detailed. Now in the background, you can get away with just a couple, but not in the foreground. Now you're going to need a lot of color in the foreground if you want it to come forward and be very effective and bright, and just simply look close. There. And be sure, after you're all done with that mid-tone, come back in and pop your darks back in if you lose some of them. And I don't want you to sit here and worry about losing them. Have fun, be loose, and come back and pop them in. I don't want my darks to be solid in this area, so let them mix with what you have down. That's fine. There. See, it's just not complicated. It just takes a lot of patience, a little bit of planning, and you can create beautiful rocks. Now with our 3/4 brush, we'll sort of finish up this painting by adding on a few highlights to these trees. Not going to take a whole lot, just a few here and there. And I love having a bit of a golden cast to some of these highlights. Not all of them, but certainly some. It makes it look like the dry pine needles and different things, maybe some old branches. But this far away, it sort of just mushes into color. So if you put a little bit of brown or gold into some of your trees, it just gives them a little note of realism. There. Just repeat this process for all the trees. They're all the same. The big and the small ones, it's exactly the same. Just use tiny little brush strokes and leave a lot of dark. All right, well, I think we're done. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. Don't forget to check out my website, my DVDs, and also my brush line. And thanks for watching.